Welcome, everyone, to the Nonprofit 2.0 podcast. We help nonprofit leaders scale their impact, adopt new systems, and just get lots of learnings from experts who come on the show. Today, I'm really excited to welcome Rob Harter. He is an awesome coach and just has done so much for his nonprofit clients and has really cared a lot about this industry. So I'm going to have Rob introduce himself and we'll kick off.
Yeah, great to be on the show, Cherry. Thanks for having me. Yeah, just real quick, I've been in the nonprofit sector for over 30 years now, hard to believe. And yeah, leading nonprofit organizations, building them from scratch. Most recently, I was the CEO of an organization. It was a humanitarian organization. I was able to be the executive director and then moving up to the CEO, and just got to see a lot of real growth, both the size of the organization, the reach, how many people we were able to serve. And then, yeah, the last 2 years now, I'm full-time, got my own coaching and consulting business. My real passion has always been to help mission organizations, right? Mission-driven organizations. And now I get to work with the leaders of those organizations because I'm a big believer. If you can change the leadership of an organization, you can really change the whole trajectory of that organization. And so that's what I get to do. So I have clients from all different types of organizations. And I work with business clients as well, for-profit organizations. But it's really been fun. And I love just diving into this world of leadership.
That's awesome. And just out of curiosity, how come you made that change? What prompted it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I was a couple of reasons, probably there's more, but just in general, I would say the main reason was I really had this desire to be able to impact lots of different organizations. I was leading an organization where I was the CEO, but I also served on some boards. But what was attracting me to consulting and coaching was the opportunity to work with, again, multiple organizations across the country, as opposed to just being focused on local and even regional leadership. And that just opportunity started opening up and coming my way. And I thought that would be really a nice next generation, if you will, for me, a next step in my chapter for my leadership. And so that's what really drew me initially. And then it's continued that where I have been able to now work with lots of different organizations of all sizes and be able to help multiple organizations doing great work, again, all over the country.
That's amazing. I mean, you shared a lot of the reasons that motivate me as well to be able to help our nonprofit clients. And in my world, we help businesses and government and different types of agencies as well. But our nonprofit work is a lot of that legacy work of, if one day we're not around, I hope that the work that we supported our nonprofits do is still carrying and continuing to create impact. So that's awesome. Just by way of introduction, I'm Cherry. I'm your podcast host. I'm the founder and CEO of Claribase. We create systems for modern organizations that are looking to scale and report on their grant funding reports and impact reporting. So we help our nonprofit clients with a lot of the execution and the data management and the automation part of the work. So I
Nice.
would love to know through that transition and having seen lots of different organizations, both on boards in your previous role as the executive director and then CEO, and now as a coach, what are some key trends that you think are shaping the nonprofit world, and what have you seen over the years?
Oh, that's a great question because there's a lot of trends now that are popping up. And I certainly, as you know, I've had a lot of guests on my nonprofit leadership podcast talk about these trends. So I'll just mention a couple of them. There's several, but number one, certainly AI is really and smart technology in general is growing and growing. And so people more and more are adopting that. They're utilizing that, particularly in the areas of anything in their organization where they can really improve efficiency, particularly those things that are just repetitive tasks that can really help quite a bit. There's a lot in terms of predictive and analytics when it comes to your donor base. That is often not taken over, but AI tools can really help you maximize that. Particularly the larger organization you have, you can really utilize some of those AI tools for good. Again, because you're still in control of them, but they can just really speed things up, make your organization a little bit more efficient with their time and effective then, therefore. So that's a big one. Certainly in the fundraising world, lots of changes. For example, it's interesting. Overall giving to nonprofits is going up. The last couple of years is actually going up, but the individual donors giving is going down. So the number of donors dropping, the increase in overall dollars is actually increasing. And that's because you've got a smaller group of people giving larger gifts. but overall, less people are giving to nonprofits. So that's an interesting conundrum, which I'm sure we'll talk about today. And so that one's we can chat more about. And then the third one, maybe just for the quick answer on this one, is the generational changes, right? You've got Gen Z, millennials coming in now in leadership positions, more and more involvement in terms of donor relationships. And so that's a really interesting mix and change that they're bringing, I think, a great new, fresh perspective to the nonprofit sector. And so we could talk a little bit more about that, but definitely some interesting trends coming along.
Yeah, absolutely. There were multiple things that really resonated with me in that AI piece. I find a lot of people are trying to adopt AI, but then they don't have the like clean, structured data to be able to do that. So we always say, yes, like we'll help our clients adopt AI, but we just do it in a way where we want to help them walk before they run. And we were actually just building a workflow where if a new donor comes in based on whatever email, name, like domain level information you can grab from them. You can actually send the AI to do a little bit of research on that person and then reference it in that database of have they been to an event? Have they been to a learning session? Like,
There
is
you go.
that how they got initially connected? So we're definitely seeing those AI workflows be really helpful for our clients. But again, it kind of can be more helpful if they already have that structured data in place. And then the second thing you talked about is really interesting to me in that you're saying the number of donors is decreasing, but the amount of donations are actually going up. So
Yeah.
that really feels like the nonprofits that can build the right relationships with their donors are going to win in this next period, whereas other ones, there's just not as many donors around. So they're not going to like the pool of people who will donate or who can and are donating is smaller. So how have you seen nonprofits navigate this?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So yeah, again, just for your listeners, so the overall dollars given to nonprofits is increasing, individual donors dropping. And so what are nonprofits doing? I think number one, they're trying to really segment their donors a little bit more intentionally to really understand who are our donors and then who are those major donors that are giving more gifts, larger donation, financial dollar amounts. And then what do we do? How do we make sure we steward those relationships and make sure they fully understand our mission and they feel very bought in, they feel very supported? So I think people are doing things like really being intentional again with their donors, bringing them in almost like onboarding a staff. You onboard a donor if they're new specifically, but even if they've been a donor for a while, bringing them in and bringing a much more relational approach to those donors. So one of the big maybe aha ideas I'd pass on to your listeners that I've talked quite a bit on my own show is moving away from a transactional relationship with your donors to a relational, connection with your donors. Now that may be really obvious, but you'd be surprised how many nonprofits kind of take it for granted. They're like, oh yeah, that person's always going to give. And they're just, that foundation's always going to give. They've given the last 5 years. That's not happening as much anymore. So what people are doing, and donors are realizing this, donors are smart. They want a bit more of that personalization, that connection to the mission, making sure this organization where they give their money, it's actually going to where they want their money to go, right? So I think that sense of really building those relationships is going to be key. That's what I think nonprofits that are responding well to this moment are doing and continuing to grow is they're making this very much a relational moment, doubling down, if you will, investing on the time they have with donors. And it's ironic based on what you just said earlier. It's so true. Like if you can combine your nonprofits where or nonprofit organization, if you can combine the AI optimization of a workflow process or just streamlining some of that, again, real efficient predictive analytics or something you're doing with your CRM, if you can save time by kind of handing that off to AI or using some kind of technology tool to really improve and save you time, use then that extra time you have to really invest in your donors. Building those relationships, making those connections, the old fashioned get on the phone and call somebody, right? Write a handwritten note, meet with people in person if you can. All those things are going a long way. So I think if I were just to summarize what are people doing effectively, I think that's one of the key ones is really moving away again from a transactional to a relational approach.
Yeah, I love that you just said call up your donors because
Yeah.
as we
Who does that anymore, right?
do so many email like blasts and so many ways to just get AI to do research and do all of those like touch points, like actually calling someone on the phone must be just that next level of intimacy. It's almost like moving forward and then stepping back in order to just some things are not replaceable with AI. and with new
No,
technology.
that's right. Exactly.
That's awesome. And you also touched on this piece around newer generation of people coming into nonprofits. They're becoming donors. I'm sure they're just part of that relationship. What are some ways that you've seen organization navigate the age difference
Yeah.
of Gen Z, I guess?
Yeah, that Gen Z and even millennials coming up. Yes, I would say a couple of things. They really want to be involved. So get them involved as much as possible. So they don't have as much money, potentially depends, right? Not always. Some people amazingly have done really well, even in younger years, and they're able to give and ready to give. But even if you say, because I've had a lot of people say, well, they don't have as much money as some of the folks that have been with us for a long time and have their foundation set up. And that may be true, but either way, this generation, Gen Z and millennials, want to be involved. So get them involved, get them plugged in. They can be some of your biggest advocates, your cheerleaders, if you will, for your organization. And that goes a long way. So I'd say get them involved with social media, helping, either literally helping, some people that are particularly smaller and they need someone to really improve their social media, or they want to hire people in that generation to actually do the job. Or if you just simply need feedback, or get them engaged where they're like posting and liking and reposting and just engaging more people in that social media sphere. That really goes a long way. So that's a big one. And then I think the other piece is giving them a sense that their voice is heard. I've often heard this phrase that not everyone gets a vote, but everyone has a voice. And so if you make sure you have, if it's you volunteers or staff on your team that are Gen Zers and or millennials, make sure they feel like they have a voice, that they can contribute. Now, again, depending on their position, they may not have an actual vote on the final decision on whatever, your fundraising committee or, your budget. But if you give them a sense that they have a voice and they feel like they're actually making a difference, that's going to make the world of a difference for them. So I think that will be a key one. And then a real practical thing is they're very much into crowdfunding. They definitely utilize online tools. Of course, they adopt AIs. We've already talked about a bit. Anything along those lines where you're utilizing technology, that's where that next generation is going to be engaging with you in that way, either, in the online community or just helping you with your organization. So those are just a couple of ways I feel like that are really nonprofits that are effectively bringing people in, welcoming people from Gen Z, are really thriving.
Yeah. And what you just said reminded me of a conference I attended a couple of weeks ago. They were talking about reverse mentorship. This was in the context of a company, but they had
Yes.
the older generation who wasn't as technology adept get paired up with the
Yes.
younger generation, and they would
Yeah.
essentially be teaching them, sometimes how to use ChatGPT, how to open Copilot on their computer and where to find the button. And it's like
Yeah,
everyone
exactly.
can meet each other at a different spot. And the younger staff members are able to get that exposure to leadership, whereas the, I guess, older crowd has more of that context. So there is lots of opportunities for people from different ages and generations to work together. And I think too often we might delineate between someone who's older and someone who's younger. I think from that conversation, I didn't actually think it was a reverse mentorship situation. It was just collaboration with a different
Right.
name.
Right.
But I think people could be um, just taking advantage of the different people's skills and sometimes ages in their organization.
Yeah, I will just double down on that in a good way like that. I think you're absolutely right. I had a guest on my show actually talking about exactly that, and they also use that same term of a reverse mentoring. But I think whatever you call it, collaboration, reverse mentoring, the idea is that you recognize that someone, perhaps a generation under you or two generations under you, they have something to teach you. So just as you are trying to mentor them in certain areas, they can mentor you in technology or other things like AI. And that is such a good thing. And you're right. I think the organizations that are really embracing and engaging Gen Zers and millennials in an effective way are allowing that to happen. And so I think whatever you want to call it, just be really intentional about that. I think that will make a huge difference for your sense of people that are in that generation really feel like this is my place. Because that's another interesting thing that you probably have seen these stats. People in the Gen Z generation, millennial generation, they are selecting where they want to work. And this is for-profit, nonprofit, both. It's not just about compensation. It's actually about the culture. In fact, many of them have said in surveys that culture is slightly even more important than compensation. Now, again, they don't want to get paid poorly. It's just that culture is so important to them. They will actually vote with an organization. So, for example, if compensation is about the same at one organization versus another, they will choose the culture that feels healthier and feels more welcoming and more engaging to them. So, culture is a big deal for this next two generations. And so, to really be attuned to that is important. I think that reverse mentoring is part of that.
Yeah, I've definitely made decisions in my life where a culture was an important factor of the job offer I accepted. So
There you go.
had been on both sides where if the culture of the company wasn't great, there's just like a lot of anxiety around work and questions rolling around in your head and just it's a lot of mental energy to work somewhere that and like doesn't take care of its people. Whereas a company that does, I think people just show up in a lot more of a positive way. There's a lot more trust, there's a lot more collaboration, and probably organizations that have a better culture are able to adopt new tools a little bit faster because they do have a culture of collaboration rather than competitiveness.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, well said.
Yeah. And in your world, I know there's lots of changes happening. When you work with leaders, like, do you have a framework for working with them, or how do you approach actually helping someone?
That's a great question. People ask all the time. I'm a big believer that I don't believe when it comes to coaching specifically that one size fits all. I just think it's so important to really custom make your relationship again because every person is a bit different. Their experience is a bit different. Often, what they come to me for executive or leadership coaching is different. And so I always use kind of two methods, if you will. First is a discovery call, I'll call it. And that's where we just sit on just a free call, typically 30, maybe 45 minutes, just to get an understanding. What are you looking for in coaching? What could be most helpful? Is this a good fit? All of those questions kind of are answered in that discovery call. And then the next one, if they agree to it, I move forward. I usually give them, here's a proposal of what we would do. Here's what this could look like. Here's what the coaching relationship would be all about. And then that first couple of sessions even is really beginning to unpack. Tell me more your story. Tell me about your personality. We typically have some kind of personality inventory that's part of that first part. A lot of giving me your background and help me understand things. And then we quickly then jump into, okay, what are your pain points? Where are the big blocks in your progress? Where are the lids on your leadership? So we certainly do a lot of that. We get moving on that. And so but bottom line to your question, I really try to seek to custom make it. Now, having said that, assuming it's custom made, typically the three areas I really specialize in: fundraising, number one. Of course, I do that as a consultant too, which I see is a bit different than coaching.
Yeah.
Fundraising is a big piece of helping people understand that. How do you do that well? Strategic planning is a big piece I'm doing more and more of. And then leadership development. So really helping them personally as a leader, and then how, particularly if they're an executive director or CEO, which a lot of the people I'm coaching are, they're the head of their organization. How do you grow in your own leadership so that you can then help develop a culture of leadership that's really healthy for the organization? So that can be everything from self-leadership, self-care, developing a really good balance between your schedule, a good work-life balance. Where does your energy match your most important meetings? Where does your energy match your overall schedule? I found so many people, as one example, and I fell into the same category where you just often in a mission driven organization, right? You're so committed to the mission, you kind of sacrifice your time, right? And you get up early and you stay late and you start really extending yourself. But then over time, you start losing energy. Some people, of course, are experiencing burnout and higher numbers. So a lot of that could just be getting a hold of your schedule and being way more intentional and proactive to say, put some boundaries around your schedule and really start mapping out where are your energy zones, where are you most energetic, where do you have the most energy, and map that with your most important meetings, your most important work, so that you really are maximizing the same amount of time in a given day, week, or month, but you're really maximizing that time. I've done that with some of my clients and it's huge. It's just a subtle thing, but boy, it can make all the difference because now they're being intentional. They feel like they're in control of their schedule rather than someone else controlling their schedule, which is just the demands of the job. So I could go on, but those are just a couple of things that I like to do and have seen real success with.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, I want to dive a little bit deeper into this energy matching your schedule and putting boundaries in place because I think regardless of who the person is, like I don't know a single person who doesn't wish they had more time in their day. Like
Yeah, right.
everyone around
Exactly.
me, well, myself included, we're all like, wow, I wish I had 30 hours in a waking day and I could do
Yes.
everything off of my to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone experiences that. Like, where do you start? Because um, for the person who has been like stuck in a rut for a little bit, like how do you pull them out of that cycle?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. A couple of ways. There is a great book called At Your Best by an author named Carey Nieuwhof, and he has a podcast too, and he's a leadership consultant. So the book all basically talks about these three different energy zones. And so that's why I'm sharing this, because it's his concept. And I think it's really a brilliant concept. The idea is that generally, and this is generally speaking, all of us have a variety of energy levels, and he calls them green, yellow, and red. So green is where you have the highest energy. You are fully in, you are focused, you have your clearest thinking, you make your best decisions, you have your most energy to really move your organization forward. And so, for example, maybe that, I ask people to analyze and do kind of a time audit for their schedule. Is that for you like 9 a.m. to like 1 p.m. or what is that green zone where you just really feel like you're on fire? Or sometimes it's 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. There's a little bit of a break and you get really lethargic in the afternoon, and then you pick back up and you have energy again, either in the evening or late in the afternoon. Kind of depends on everyone's schedule. And then, so that's first, let's find out where your green energy, highest energy is. Where's your yellow energy, where you're not quite as sharp. You still have energy and you're ready to go, but you're not quite on your game, maybe as well as when you're in that green energy zone. Then the red energy zone really is where you're just kind of wiped out. Your mind is not clear. You take longer to process things. You take longer to make decisions. So here's a real practical example. I've seen this. I've fell into this trap. Many of my clients have, where in nonprofit organizations, for example, you'll have a lot of meetings in the evening, right? And it's partly because it's the only time people can meet. Or sometimes it's early in the morning. Now, if you're the morning person, you have morning meetings, great. It's perfect because you matched your green energy zone. Or if you're not, or say you are a morning person, but then you have all these really important meetings with your board or whatever in the evening, and you're in your yellow to red energy zone, right? Where you're starting to go down in energy. It's tough to be on your top of your game, right? And so all of a sudden you start having these meetings and they go on forever and they seem to drag on. And I know this has happened, right? With people where they make a decision that's not the best decision because they're just out of energy. They just want to end the meeting and get home and get some sleep, right? That's not a good way to lead your organization. So really be intentional with your energy, number one, as a leader. Number two, even then start mapping that out with your team and just be intentional and be really directive with when are we going to have meetings? When am I going to be on my game, when I'm doing my best work? So it could be your strategic work. Maybe that's in the afternoon. Maybe you just really come alive between 2 and 4. Well, maybe you put in your schedule, you're not available for interruptions. You're not available for meetings during that time. Close your door or even go off site, go to one of these. Now there's so many great places, like Kiln is a place out here in the West where you can, basically rent a room and be quiet and get in there, go to the library, whatever you need to do, but get away and do some strategic thinking or planning for the future or whatever you need to do that you never quite get to. Prioritize that and put it in your energy zone where you're in your green energy zone, because it's amazing. You've probably seen this, Chair, in your own life. I know for me, when I'm putting my best energy and matching with the most important things for that organization that my role is responsible for, you see huge results. So you're actually able to move the needle. And so that's just one example of a real practical way you can start breaking those old cycles. So we can go on, but that would be my first answer.
Yeah, that's really nice. And I can even like take this away to my calendar as well, because I'm probably most energetic in the morning, but a lot of my meetings happen then. And then by the evening, I'm like, I'm too tired for the strategic stuff that I should be working on.
Yeah,
And
there you
it's
go.
always this, I think in a leadership role, whether it's for ED or for a manager, part of being a leader is that you are strategic and you're planning for the organization, you're planning for your team, and you're planning for what your volunteers are going to do in advance, and not
That's right.
showing up to the meetings reactive and letting other people pull you in different directions. So having time to think is so precious. And that's
Yeah,
really what
exactly.
you're trying to articulate. And like, again, no one has enough time. So we just
That's
have to
right.
make
That's right.
time for the important stuff. And what about, after people clear their calendar and rework their calendar, what happens after that?
Yeah, so this is a good one. So I'll tell people, ruthlessly eliminate anything on your schedule that you absolutely do not have to be a part of. And so this is a tough process, particularly if you've been in an organization for a long time, or if you were the founder, it's even harder, where you have built so much around you as the personality, you as the everything person. An executive director at a nonprofit wears lots of hats. So they typically have done so many jobs, maybe every single job of that nonprofit, particularly if they're smaller, right? But even as they grow and they become medium-sized or large, you really have to look down, okay, at your schedule and say, what are things that I absolutely have to do? And so you may have to go back to the board and say, okay, what are the things you need me as executive director or CEO? So I'm speaking at that level first. Or if you're, say, a managing director, you're a development director, a program director, go to your CEO and say, tell me the things you need me to do. What are those key areas, my mandate, if you will, of what I need to do and only I can do? And get clarity on that if you need. And once you have clarity, then literally go through all the different things. It's a long process, but you just process through all the things in a given day, week, month. That's usually enough time to really figure out, okay, I don't have to be at that meeting. I don't have to do that task. I could delegate this over here. I should not be at that meeting. That's what you start doing is you literally go through and ruthlessly, again, eliminate things, because the idea behind it is the goal is not to be busy with a lot of things. The goal is to be busy with the right things. Right? You want to be really invested in those things that are most important for you, the right things on your schedule. And so and once you go through that, I found they're like, yeah, that's really what I need to do, like strategic planning, for example. Or if they're the CFO, they really got to carve out time to do some forecasting, for their financial future for the organization, or they really need to put time into, maybe it's payroll or whatever. But basically, essentially write out, these are the essential things. I will not budge from them. And then if you have an assistant, make sure they're aware of this, or if you're your own assistant, if you will, when it comes to meetings being then added to your schedule, once you've cleared it, right, you've ruthlessly eliminated everything. Then when you add things, force it through this grid, if you will, or a funnel of, does it match the things that I am responsible for? And if it's not, then say no. Or if it's just one of those meetings like maybe I could do this once a month. Okay, so you could come back to your colleague or another person and say, I can meet with you, but I can only just do it once a month for 45 minutes. So again, you're in control of your schedule. You're being very intentional with what you allow back into your schedule. And then you'll see major, I think, success. And I've just seen this where people just feel, again, empowered. Their loads lifted. They feel like they come to work and they get much more intentional work done. They're more proactive with their schedule, and they just feel more successful at the end of the day. And I think they are more effective as leaders because they're not being drawn into so many other things that are not really, at the end of the day, most important for mission accomplishment. So that's what it looks like, is just, again, eliminating things, getting clarity on what you're responsible for, and then do not allow anything back in unless it matches, the criteria that you have set now for your responsibilities.
Yeah, and that is so important for organizations where not all the information can be living in that executive director's head just because they started the organization and they have the most history, or maybe they've been there 5 years and everyone is newer. I find that's a lot of the areas where systems help, because when new executive directors come to us, they're often trying to untangle the mess of where is all of the information and how can I see things a little more easily so that I'm not having my team context switch and aggregate information for 3 days every time we need to do grant reporting. I'm not having to pull people out of their programming work because our board asked a question and now someone needs to spend a couple of hours just
There you go.
finding all of the email threads and the spreadsheets and all of that information. I think having the right tools in place can also go a long way when it comes to just being able to say no to things, but also not being involved in some of the just day-to-day reactive things that people have to do. And then you also touched on, what do you let back into that person's schedule? So obviously there's the donor relationships, which we touched on. Lots of people are coming into the workforce that might be a different generation, and maybe setting up mentorship programs might be some of those things that the ED is thinking about, or thinking of those ideas to be able to delegate. There are also just issues in the nonprofit that are not avoidable, like costs are rising.
That's right.
There's lots of different impact to government funding right now. There's just fires that people have to put out, and it's not something that an ED can just say, well, I'm going to decline to deal with this because my board said that's not one of my priorities.
You brought up such a good point, because you have to still run it through the realistic filter, right? And
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
hitting it, right? Rising costs. grants being cut, you're responsible for certain things. So what I found is, and I do agree with that, but for the exercise of ruthlessly eliminating everything that's not absolutely essential, just that exercise alone, you get rid of most of things. And then as you start bringing things back in, say, for example, you're really not responsible for, I'll just throw HR. That's not really your thing. But then you get pulled into all these meetings. What I found is, say you did a quick time on and you realize I spend about 20% of my week on HR related things. And it's not even my responsibility. You have an HR director, right? Once you do that ruthless elimination process, and you allow certain things to come in, even if you reduce it by half or down to 5%, for example, you've just saved 10%, 15% of your time added up every day, every week, every month, every year. Now you're adding to productivity, right? So that's, you still have to maybe be involved. You can't say no to it altogether. You can't just say, well, it's not my job. So who cares? You still do it, but it's reduced. And so I think that is the goal, is you're really chipping away. And then hopefully by even that time differential, you have a little bit more time to invest. Hopefully the organization keeps growing at least enough where you can delegate maybe that last 10 or even last 5%. Maybe to someone else. Eventually you hire somebody, you get an assistant, you get somebody else that can come alongside and really hand that off to, delegate that to. So I do think it's a matter of a process. So yeah, you can't do this stark, hey, go to the board. I can't do, half of my job description. That's not a good thing. You don't want to lose your job here. But I think it's just that process of going through it and then slowly bring it back in with a realistic approach. Even that though, just cutting it by 10%, for example, could make a huge difference. And if you do that with multiple areas, you'll be surprised how much time you can find.
Yeah. And I always have, I'm trying a new thing here, even independent of our conversation. I'm trying to have my Thursday afternoons just booked off for more
Okay.
strategic work. I
Yeah.
know everyone has those like 5, 10, 30 things that's on the back of their to-do list that is important, but it's not urgent. So they just put it off. And I think just in terms of sharing tips, that's been helpful to me recently.
Yeah, a term that's not original with me, but I picked up, it's this idea of a parking lot. Those things that you just can't quite get to, put them in a parking lot and review your parking lot. Say, sometimes you could do it every day, depends on how important those things are, but certainly every week, review your parking lot and just put that in your schedule, like review parking lot issues, and so that's a way of just parking it for now. It's out of your brain, but you'll get to it. Say it's every Friday afternoon, or maybe it's every Monday morning or whatever, where you review the things you set aside. So you're not forgetting them. You have a place to put them. And mentally, it's kind of nice to hand that off. But now you get back to them. Then you decide again, oh, do I need to take it out of the parking lot and then discuss it? Is it important now for this week? Or should I, do I have the time to deal with it? If not, keep in the parking lot, review it again the next week. So that process where you have a process to put things aside so you don't feel like, because what you mentioned, I did the same thing. I used to have all this to-do list in a sense. I literally would write it out and I had a sheet. And it was on my computer, but it was always there and kind of like staring me down, right? You have this back of your mind, like, oh, you feel always behind, perpetually behind. That's not a great feeling at all. And something about being more, in control of your schedule, and more empowered to say, I'm aware of those things. I put them on my parking lot issue list and I'm going to review them later. Even that just flipped it around for me. So it was like kind of a mindset shift that really helped me be more intentional with my time and be way more lighter, if you will, when it comes to these day's tasks or this week's tasks.
Yeah, that's really nice. And I know we started with fundraising and then
Yeah.
delved into a little bit more of that, like, preventing burnout, having more control of your schedule, making
Yeah.
sure we're actually making time and focusing on the things that are truly important. I think that's as important for a executive director, and having your coaching background, really wanted to learn a little bit more about that. Where can our guests find you?
Yeah. So the best way, robharter.com is my personal website for my coaching and consulting. ROBHARTER, robharter.com. And then the Nonprofit Leadership Podcast. You can go online, of course, find that. You can go on anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can tune in. It's super fun. I've been doing it now for 10 years and absolutely love it. And some wonderful guests on that show too. So those are probably the best places. Last, personally, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can always reach out and start following and we can connect. But yeah, LinkedIn's a great spot I found, particularly with these kind of conversations. LinkedIn is a great platform for that.
Yeah. That's great. And thanks so much for being on the show. If you ever want to come back, just let us know and would love to hear more about what you're doing with all of your clients, how you're helping folks with strategic planning and fundraising, all of it. If for any of our guests that want to learn more about how systems can help you really get your sanity back and get
Yeah.
more of your time back with your team, you're welcome to check out claribase.com or fill out our data health check for your organization. You get a custom plan over 90 days on how you can do some self-help to improve your organization systems and data processes.